A bit of breaking news. It appears that Sergei Pavlovich is going to be the backup for Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic at UFC 295 in New York. I'll read the statement here. Pavlovich, who's currently riding a 6-fight win streak, is expected to back up UFC 295 main event between Jones and Miocic at Madison Square Garden in New York. Sources confirmed the news to MMA Fighting on Wednesday following an initial report from Igor Lazorin on Instagram. So it appears that Pavlovich will be the backup. And I wanted to make this video because I did a video back in April saying that Jon Jones will never fight Sergei Pavlovich. And I'm here to double down on that and say that I still don't think, even with this news, Sergei Pavlovich and Jon Jones will happen. Knock on wood right now, make sure you don't break any mirrors, make sure no black cats are going by here. But let's hope that Jon Jones and Stipe does end up happening, because if Sergei Pavlovich is the replacement for Stipe, I don't think Jon Jones takes the fight. And it's not because he's scared. I just don't think this fight ever happens. I just don't think Jon has anything to gain from this. I think this is a nice story, and, credit to Pavlovich's management for getting him this opportunity. And if I'm Pavlovich, I would do the same thing. Why would I take another fight right now? But I still don't think the fight happens, because Jones strategically took this fight against Stipe because it's a winnable fight for him. Stipe Miocic, and I mean, we've seen the odds on this fight already. In fact, I think we have them here. Okay, we don't have them right now, but you can see that Jon Jones is going to be a heavy favorite going into this fight. I know Jones is 36. Stipe, though, 20-4 record. He's 41 years old, and he's not fought since the Ngannou fight in 2021. So things are not looking very good for Stipe in this fight. And Jon Jones came back after a huge layoff and looked like he hadn't skipped a beat, finishing Cyril Gane in the very first round. But I just think for Jones, the whole plan all along was to come back. I think the initial plan for him was to come back and fight Francis. Okay, that doesn't happen. I'll come back and win a title that'll add more to my legacy. He wins the title from Cyril Gane. And then he's like, you know what? I'll defeat who many consider the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time in Stipe Miocic. And he's doing so with the, knowledge in mind that Stipe has had a long layoff and he hasn't fought in a while, and he's 41 years old. That's very strategic. With Sergei Pavlovich, Jon Jones has absolutely nothing to gain from this fight. Pavlovich, yes, he's 18-1. The casual fan does not know or care that much about Sergei Pavlovich. Internationally, I'm sure Pavlovich is very well known, but Jon Jones, he's looking at the grand scheme of this things. What are fans going to remember about him? They're going to remember if he beats a Stipe Miocic. If he beats a Sergei Pavlovich, I don't think that really means much to the outside world, outside of our hardcore MMA bubble. And so that's why I think he does not fight Sergei Pavlovich. What I predict is going to happen, and I'll just say this now, is Jon and Stipe are going to fight. Jon's going to win. Jon's going to retire. Sergei Pavlovich will then fight Tom Aspinall for a vacant title. I basically formulated this whole thing at the beginning of the year. I did a video on this, I think, on Future Champions, and I basically said this is going to happen, and things are kind of lining up that way. And even Jon himself has, I think he had a quote coming out the other day. Where is it? Talking about how he doesn't want to fight up-and-comers. Let me find this. Jon Jones, up-and-comers. Where is it here? Not interested in new prospects. I came back ready for Ngannou. This was from a recent interview he did the other day, and he says, they're amazing, don't get me wrong. Jones said during a lengthy interview on the Overdogs podcast, they're starching people in the first round, but as I get older, I have to look at this as a business and not just speak out of pride. I have to speak as my legacy as a business. I don't think Jon's afraid to fight Sergei Pavlovich. I just think he's like, why would I do this? What is the upside for me fighting Sergei Pavlovich? Again, he's not a household name. He doesn't speak much English. He's not kind of what I'm getting at is that the average casual fan doesn't know that much about Sergei Pavlovich. Hardcore fans do 100%. I mean, everyone knows who Pavlovich is, but I think Jones looks at that and goes, why would I bother? It reminds me a bit of George St. Pierre when he came back to fight Bisping when he was middleweight champion. If Yoel Romero or Jacare Souza or Robert Whitaker were all middleweight champion, you think George St. Pierre is going to come back and fight them? Probably not. And I think it's just very strategic for Jones to fight Stipe, and it's pretty much Stipe or bust. That's kind of what I'm getting at here. Now, suppose there's another possibility here where Sergei Pavlovich should step in for Jones. If he can't go and they maybe do a title that way, maybe that happens. I don't know if the UFC decides to go that route. But if that happens, I could see Stipe maybe fighting Pavlovich. I get it. But then maybe even Stipe is like, why would I want to fight Pavlovich? What's the upside for me there? Again, both of these guys have a lot to gain from fighting each other. They're both big names. Stipe considered the greatest heavyweight of all time. Jon Jones considered one of the best of all time. Definitely the best light heavyweight of all time. So yeah, I think the plan, the reason Jones was not in a rush to get back in the cage is because he had a very strategic plan that started with Francis Ngannou, went to just actually fighting for the title. And now it's Stipe is the only fight left for him. That's the only big name for him in the division. I know people want to see him in Aspinall. I don't think Aspinall is a big enough name for Jones to say, hey, let's make something happen. If Cormier was still around at heavyweight, I could see him even maybe taking that option because Cormier is older. But it's strategic from Jones here. And I don't think it's a bad idea here. And if I'm Jones, I probably wouldn't want to fight Pavlovich, because why even risk that? He's got this prestige of basically being undefeated. He's got the one loss. It was a DQ against Matt Hamill. I mean, pretty much most people know that that was a bad stoppage there for what Jon Jones has done. So yeah, again, I don't think he ever fights Pavlovich. I feel bad for Pavlovich. I think if we're just going off merit, 100% it should be Pavlovich and Jon Jones next. I think Stipe, to be honest, has been off for a while. I think it might have been good for him to come back and do a tune-up fight. But again, you got to look at the optics of this. Stipe, considered one of the greatest heavyweights ever. He gets that bit of leeway to fight who he wants. And for Jon Jones, he's Jon Jones, right? So again, I'm going to call it now. I'm going to say that Jon Jones does not fight Sergei Pavlovich if Stipe Miocic is out. I think the fight's off. I hope the UFC has a good co-main event for this card. It looked like possibly Colby and Leon was going to be on this card. It seems like that's not happening now. They're going to need a strong co-main event, because I'm telling you, if Stipe's out and Sergei steps in, I do not think Jon Jones fights. And I will say this right now, okay? I'm putting myself on the line here because, again, I did this video back in April, got a lot of flack. And by the way, got to mention this too. Chael Sonnen came out a while ago and said, he had that quote about how, oh yeah, Sergei Pavlovich and Jon Jones is going to happen in Australia. Well, it didn't. The plan all along was to do him and Stipe. And I got a lot of comments on this video, people saying, oh, I told you it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Chael Sonnen said so. No, it didn't. It didn't end up happening. Stipe is going to fight Jon Jones instead. But I will say this, like I was kind of just backtracking a little bit here. If Sergey and Jon fight, I will gladly do a video on this. I will eat as much crow as I can on this, but I am very certain that this fight does not happen. I just have a feeling. I just kind of know how the business works. I just don't think they're ever going to fight. Would I like to see the fight? Absolutely. I'm someone that wants to see the best fighters fight the best fighters. But if you're Jon Jones, if you've got this legacy on the line every time you're stepping in the cage, fighting a Sergei Pavlovich just does not have the reward that a lot of people think. Because a lot of people, when they're looking at fights, they don't think of the grand scheme of things. It's kind of like how we're seeing, for example, and it's not official yet, but it's kind of how like we're seeing Colby get the shot against Leon. It's the UFC kind of, valuing entertainment more off merit. Bilal Muhammad should get the title shot, right? So it's sort of how you have to look at the business, where it's like these guys look at the business as well too. What's going to make me a lot of money? What are some big money fights? What are some good matchups that I can do? And that's kind of the line of thinking here with Jones and Stipe. And that's why the UFC, to be honest, has been so patient about putting this fight together and not having any hesitation here. It's just like, hey, we got to make this happen. So and remember, like Jon fought in March. We're talking about a fight with Stipe in November. Like that's how long it took to get this fight put together. And I think the UFC always wanted to do this because look, if they really wanted Jon to fight again, don't you think Jon would have fought earlier than this? He had been off for a couple of years. Do you think if Jon wanted to come back and take a number of different fights, then he probably would have fought by now, but he hasn't because he was waiting out for Stipe because that was the plan all along. And I think, again, I'll say it one more time. I think Jones and Stipe happens. Jones wins. Jones retires. And you got Sergei Pavlovich and Tom Aspinall for the title instead. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you think Jon and Sergei ever happens? Again, I'm willing to take all the heat if it does end up happening, but I wanted to double down in this video and say it's not happening. If Stipe Miocic is out of his fight with Jon Jones, this is great that Pavlovich is the backup. Jon will not fight him and they'll have to do something else for the main event. I'm calling it right now. If Jon Jones is out of the fight and it's Stipe who needs the opponent, I could see that potentially happening. I think there's more leeway there because I think Jon's got more say and more pull in the UFC than Stipe does, just because Jon's a bigger star. It's as simple as that. So let me know in the comments. Let's have a fun discussion about this. Would love to hear your thoughts on this as long as we can keep it civil. I know that's asking a lot on social media these days and on a YouTube comment section, but let me know what you think. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.